Welcome back to another episode of Cape Ann Today with State Senator Bruce Tarr. How are you, Senator?
I'm doing great, Heather. Thanks. How are you today?
I'm good. I can tell that the cupboard behind you is looking a lot more full these days. Won 3 awards. Do you want to tell us about those awards?
Well, we had three come in rapid succession recently, Heather, and I'm very, very honored to receive these awards. But I always do so in recognition that nothing happens by one individual, that everything is accomplished as a team. And I'm just proud to be part of the teams that led to these kind of recognitions. So the first award, Heather, actually came on the day before Easter. And that was an award that I was given by the Massachusetts School of Law, who every year on the Saturday before Easter conducts an entire day about animal welfare and animal welfare laws and animal welfare advocacy. And of course, as you know, I've been involved in the passage of many animal welfare laws in Massachusetts, including one in the last legislative session relative to the adoption of research animals when they've concluded their service to medical research in Massachusetts. And so I was thrilled to be able to receive the award from the Massachusetts School of Law, particularly because this is a law school that focuses on animal welfare as part of its mission. And my good friend, the Dean, Diane Sullivan, presented me with the award, and she has just been an incredible resource in all of our work on animal welfare here at the State House and across the state. So I was very pleased to get that one. And then on the following day, I was surprised by the commander of Leicester S. Wasp Post Number 3, the American Legion in Gloucester, which has a great tradition of serving meals on holidays. And this Easter was no exception. So we all gathered at the post, and we were packing meals that then got delivered to the folks that were going to receive them by volunteer drivers. But as I arrived at the hall, I was surprised because Commander Nestor stopped everything until I could be presented with this award. And this one is really, really special and really personal, Heather, because it's the first Anthony J. Verga Award, named after my friend and colleague, State Representative Tony Verga, who, as we all know, recently passed away. And it's in recognition of community service and in service to veterans. And I was totally stunned. I showed up looking for my spoon and my spatula, and I was ready to be able to dish out stuffing, as I always do on these holidays. And the world stopped for a moment. And it was also special because the medal that goes with the award was actually presented to me by our mayor, Greg Verga, who, as we all know, is Tony Verga's son. And it was a really special moment to remember a state representative who was a great advocate for veterans and for me personally, a great friend and legislative partner. And to receive the first Anthony J. Verga Award was just very, very special to me. So I was very appreciative of that. And then last but not least, there is also a tradition at the Massachusetts State House called Agriculture Day. And we haven't been able to engage in this tradition for the last several years because of COVID-19. This was the first year in a number of years that we were able to have Agriculture Day here at the State House. And it brings together a number of different interests, including students who are part of 4-H, students who are part of the Future Farmers of America, brings in folks from the Farm Bureau and folks all across the spectrum of fishing and farming in Massachusetts. And I was thrilled to be one of 3 recipients of the Agriculture Day Award. And in this case, that was recognizing the work that I've done, again, with a team, to be able to promote local food production, whether that be buy local programs or whether that be the food security infrastructure grants that we've been working on to provide dollars to create local infrastructure, or whether it be grants to the fishing industry to be able to modernize their practices and to make sure that folks are safe at sea. So in recognition of all of those things, including the formation of the Massachusetts Seafood Collaborative, which we worked on during the pandemic, I was thrilled to receive that award as well. And, you know, Heather, awards are important, and I appreciate receiving them, particularly from groups that I have a tremendous amount of admiration for. But the most important thing is the progress that we've made working together. And these awards reflect that, and I am just thrilled to see that progress and to see it recognized.
I just want to make one little, or ask you one little question. Was fishing always included in the mass agricultural conversation?
Not necessarily. And that's something that we've been working very hard on, because fishing certainly has a supportive audience here at the State House, but it hasn't necessarily been considered in the same context as farming. And over the last few years, we've been trying to ensure that it's a balanced conversation. And as we talk about local food production, and there's certainly been a lot of emphasis on local farming, and I've been involved in supporting a lot of local meat production and poultry production. But as we talk about that, we always have to remember that one of the first industries in Massachusetts, and we'll be remembering this during our 400th anniversary, is commercial fishing. And so my goal has been over the last several years to ensure that whenever we have a conversation about one, we have a conversation about the other. And I think we're in a much different place than we were even a decade ago with regard to thinking about them as one element of food production in Massachusetts that provides us with locally grown and harvested products that are healthy, they're nutritious, they're cost effective, and they're a secure source of food. And that became so important during the pandemic.
Well, let's move on to the budget. The budget is still sort of getting tossed around as a very important issue up there on the Hill. So tell us what's going on.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And it seems at times that we spend almost all of our time in the first half of the year talking about the state budget, and now is no exception. So we talked a while ago about Governor Healy filing her budget proposal back in March. And the next step that happened were hearings by the Ways and Means Committees of the House and the Senate. There was one of those reported in the local media, certainly the Gloucester Times, where we had a Ways and Means Committee hearing at the Beauport Hotel, or actually, I'm sorry, it was at Cruzport in Gloucester. And now that the Ways and Means Committee's hearings are done, each Ways and Means Committee will report out its budget proposal. And the House Ways and Means Committee does that in April. And they just recently reported out their budget proposal. And amendments for that budget proposal were due last Friday. Now, a couple of notable things about it, as Governor Healy's budget was about $55.5 billion. The House Ways and Means Committee budget increases by about $700 million over that. So it's about $56.2 billion. And it's about $3.73 billion more than the current fiscal year that we're in, which ends at the end of June, the beginning of July. So the House put forward its proposal, and again, a tremendous number of amendments. 1,566 amendments have been filed by the members of the House. And what happens this week, which is also school vacation week for the most part, is that the members all look at those amendments, decide which ones they're going to co-sponsor. They have discussions about the amendments. And then next week, and I believe they're going to start on Tuesday, they'll actually start the debate in the House on the budget, and they should be concluded by Friday. When they're done, our Ways and Means Committee, of which I'm a member, will report out our budget proposal, and we will debate the budget in the week that leads up to Memorial Day. So next week, it's all the House, and the House has done some significant things in terms of increasing dollars for education through Chapter 70 by about $600 million. So the House is going to consider all of those things, including the increases in educational aid and the increase in general unrestricted general government aid, and then they will send the budget over to us. Meanwhile, our Senate Ways and Means Committee right now is putting together a budget that will be released probably the first week in May, and then we'll follow the same cycle that the House is following, except we'll be a month later. And then once the two versions of the budget have been passed, they'll need to be reconciled by a conference committee, 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, and they'll begin their work shortly after the Senate finishes its work on the budget. And hopefully that reconciliation will be expeditious, and we'll be able to get a budget in place before the beginning of the new fiscal year on July 1st. We don't always meet that deadline. We don't often miss it by much, but hopefully we'll be able to have it in time this year so that we don't have to do an interim budget, which is something that we frequently do, a 1/12th budget or a 1/24th budget, just so that we don't have the interruption of the operations of state government. unlike at the national level where we oftentimes hear discussion of government shutting down or things being interrupted, in Massachusetts, we work together, we work collegially, and if we need more time, we'll pass a budget that will keep things moving by using the spending amounts from this fiscal year and applying them to the first weeks or months of the next fiscal year so that we can finish the work that we need to do to get a reconciled budget.
So, and I assume there's total transparency. You always know what's happening in the House budget when you as a Ways and Means, Senate Ways and Means Committee starts considering the Senate budget, right?
Well, we will be looking at the House version of the budget very carefully, but frankly, we like to write our own. And so we'll be putting together our own budget document, but we'll be watching what happens in the House. And of all of those amendments, oftentimes they are consolidated into a lesser number of larger amendments. And sometimes it's a little bit tricky to decipher what's happening there, but we'll be watching that to make sure that we understand. And then we will have a full and vigorous debate in the Senate.
All right. So will we be able to talk to you that week about what's going on?
Absolutely. I may look a little bit more frazzled than I do right now, but I look forward to being able to give you an update that week as we're in progress and being able to tell you some of the highlights of the budget that we will release very shortly and some of the concerns that I have that we'll try to address through amendment in that budget if those concerns need to be addressed and they're not included in the main budget document.
Well, I was just going to ask you for highlights right now. Can you share any with us right now? Any?
Well, it's a little too soon to discuss that. However, I will say that very high on my list will be Chapter 70, again, minimum per pupil aid, and Chapter 70 funding generally, funding for special education, funding for mental health in our schools, which is a major issue that needs to be addressed. We'll also be looking at unrestricted general government aid. We'll be looking at trying to increase the amount of funding for regional school transportation, which is important to a number of the regional school districts in our area, all of the regional school districts in our area. We'll also be taking a look at workforce development because that's a major issue that needs to be addressed. We continually hear about gaps in our workforce and ways that we need to be able to meet the challenges that are presented by those gaps. And we'll be talking a little bit about energy as well and the electric grid. So the budget is the one document, Heather, that every legislator knows ultimately is going to pass in some form. And so we all come to it with all of our priority subjects wanting to touch on them in one way or another in the budget because we know it will get to the governor's desk. We don't always succeed in every category and in every case, but that's the nature of the debate. It's a very comprehensive document that details not only spending and not only spending priorities, but policy priorities as well.
You know, you mentioned energy, and I just am wondering if you're willing to comment on the news today that Maine jury has agreed to allow that line between Massachusetts and Maine to be created. Do you want to comment on that?
I'm happy to comment about it. The line to be able to bring hydroelectricity in particular into Massachusetts is critical to our being able to meet our goals under the Global Warming Solutions Act to reduce carbon emissions very aggressively, particularly leading up to the year 2050. And one of the significant things about the hydroelectric component of our strategy is it helps us to meet base load. So when we talk about wind energy and we talk about solar energy, those things, while they do produce a lot of energy, are still intermittent. We need the wind to be blowing and the sun to be shining. Hydroelectricity has the ability to address base load because it is much more constant in its delivery of energy into the grid. And frankly, I've been extremely worried about not having this component of our strategy. Now, we've still got a long way to go, but hopefully now with this news, we will be able to reincorporate hydroelectricity into our portfolio. In the absence of that, we have been thinking a lot about storage, battery storage and other forms of storage. And we're not going to abandon that strategy. But now, if we can have hydroelectricity through this line that's been extremely controversial, then it will greatly enhance our ability to meet our very ambitious goals. And so I welcome the news that's coming today out of Maine.
So what do you see as further obstacles? anything in the?
Well, we still have contractual arrangements that need to be finalized. Certainly, the decision today clears the way for the permitting of the line and ultimately for the construction of the line. But that still needs to be financed, and we still have to have agreements as to who's going to get what coming south through the line. And one of the issues has been how much energy do Maine consumers get as opposed to Massachusetts consumers, and how are we going to share that energy since Maine and New Hampshire are bearing the burden of the line running through their state. So we still have some details to work out, but I'm confident that with the path to permitting cleared, we'll be able to work through those details. We just don't know all the specifics yet.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all of that. And we look forward to talking to you soon, maybe in the budget process.
Absolutely. And I look forward to it. And again, I always appreciate the ability to share some thoughts and appreciate 1623 Studios giving us the ability to give folks some insight into what's happening on Beacon Hill in greater detail than they might otherwise be able to get it.
And that's for sure. We love your insights. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Heather.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.